This is a true life story. This is Joy, 37 years old. She had a fiancé, Ken, who loved her and worked tirelessly to meet her needs. However, she compared her modest life to her wealthy friends, who enjoyed luxury through rich families, successful careers, or affluent husbands. Joy longed for the lavish lifestyle her friends had, but Ken couldn't provide it. Seeking that life, she started an affair with a wealthy, married businessman who showered her with gifts. Even as she planned her wedding with Ken, she continued the affair. Just days before the wedding, she discovered she was pregnant. Unsure of the father's identity, she decided to abort the pregnancy, fearing the baby might not be Ken's. She worried about the consequences if Ken found out later and the damage it could do to her reputation. After the abortion, she felt both relief and deep sadness, vowing to never make such a mistake again. Few months after their wedding, they began trying for a child, but month after month she couldn't conceive. Visits to multiple doctors brought no answers, leaving Joy devastated. She began to suspect the abortion had affected her ability to have children and deeply regretted her decision. She lamented that had she kept the pregnancy, she would have been a mother by now, regardless of who the father could have been. Her husband, unaware of her past, tried to comfort her, suggesting other options like adoption. However, Joy's secret came to light when Ken overheard her speaking on the phone with her former lover. Confronting her, Ken pressed until she confessed everything: the affair, the pregnancy, and the abortion. Though she begged for forgiveness, Ken couldn't look at her the same way. The betrayal was too much, and he eventually filed for divorce, leaving Joy to face the consequences of her choices alone. Now Joy's life is about second chances. After years of healing from her past mistakes, she meets Daniel. Unlike her past experiences, Daniel's kindness and love give her hope. He sees the person she's become, not the mistakes she made. Their love grows, and eventually Daniel proposes. Months after their beautiful wedding, Daniel became eager to start a family. Both of them were filled with dreams of holding their own child, dreams of raising a beautiful family. But month after month, year after year, they were unable to conceive, and their hopes turned into silent prayers, longing for miracle. Daniel, feeling the weight of their age, worried about time. He wanted to become a father, to raise a child with his wife, whose love for children was evident in her eyes whenever she saw a baby. Then at last, after years of waiting and hoping, their prayer was answered. His wife became pregnant. The joy that filled their home was indescribable. It was as though the couple had won the biggest prize in life. Every day they would talk about the baby, imagining what he would look like, what kind of person he would grow up to be. They started preparing, buying baby clothes, setting up a nursery, dreaming of the future they would all share together. Finally, the due date came, and their baby boy was born. It was, without a doubt, the happiest day of their lives. Daniel held his son for the first time, marveling at the tiny fingers, the gentle breathing, and the overwhelming love he felt. At last, he is now a father, and his wife now a mother. This was their dream come true. The baby was born premature, and because of that, the hospital recommended that the baby stay a few days for close monitoring. The new father didn't mind. He would go to the hospital every day to see his wife and their little boy, sharing precious moments and silently thanking God for this blessing. But on the third day, something happened that would change everything. The doctor called the man aside, his face grave, his tone serious. With a heavy heart, the doctor began explaining that they had discovered several health issues in the baby. Daniel listened in shock as the doctor explained piece by piece what his son was facing. "Your baby have a rare heart condition and cerebral palsy," the doctor said. He might face serious lung problems, spina bifida, and potentially blindness. These are not just minor health issues. These are life-altering conditions, things that would mean a life full of struggle, pain, and hospital visits. As the doctor continued speaking, Daniel's heart shattered. He had waited so long for this child, hoped and prayed, and now he was faced with news that no parent should ever have to hear. The joy he had felt just days before was now replaced by an unbearable weight. His child, his precious baby, might not live to see his first birthday. And even if he did, his life would be one filled with suffering and medical complications. After explaining the baby's condition, the doctor laid out two options. The first option was to do everything they could to keep the baby alive, to go through treatments, surgeries, constant medical care. But the doctor warned that this path would be filled with pain for the baby, and the costs would be astronomical. The couple would be in and out of the hospital almost every day, watching their child endure pain, a life of suffering with no guarantees of a normal future. They could give him life, but it would be a life that would demand sacrifices from everyone, a life that would drain the family physically, emotionally, and financially. The second option, the doctor explained, was to allow the baby to pass peacefully, to stop treatment and let him go. It would mean saying goodbye to their beloved child, but he would not suffer any longer. Daniel was devastated. How could he choose between his own heart and his baby's pain? How could he imagine letting his son go when he had waited so long to hold him? But at the same time, how could he stand to see him suffer, to watch him live a life of pain and struggle, knowing that every heartbeat came with difficulty? He returned to his wife and explained all the doctor had said. She listened, her own face filled with tears. She looked down at their son, her heart breaking. For her, the answer was clear. She couldn't let go. She believed that miracles could happen, that God could heal their son. She was willing to do whatever it took to keep him alive, no matter the cost, no matter the struggle. And so they chose to hold on to hope, to fight for their son's life. They prayed, they leaned on each other, and they faced each day with as much courage as they could. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the reality of their choice began to sink in. The baby's health continued to struggle, and the man's heart broke a little more every time he saw his son in pain. The medical bills piled up, draining their finances. Friends and family offered support, but they knew the financial burden was theirs to bear alone. They were spending every bit of their savings, all their hard-earned money, to keep their baby alive. And every day he asked himself if this was the right choice, if it was fair to his son, to his family. At night, when everything was quiet, he would lie awake, torn apart inside. He wanted his child to live, but he wanted his child to be happy, to be free from pain. He watched as his wife continued to believe, continued to pray for that miracle. And though he wanted to share her faith, his heart was heavy with doubt. Now months have passed and Daniel feels exhausted, physically, emotionally, financially. He is drained. His son, his beautiful boy, is still here, still fighting, but every day is a reminder of the pain and the struggle they're all facing. He finds himself wondering what the future holds. Should they keep going, keep praying for a miracle? Or should he try to convince his wife to let their son go, to let him find peace? One day he summoned courage and tried to talk to his wife, explaining his worries, his doubts, and his fears about their future. He gently suggested that they let their son go, that they could give him peace, and maybe, one day, try for another child. But she refused to even consider it. Her heart was set on believing for a miracle, and she couldn't let go. Her family and friends had also advised her to keep the child, saying that what God cannot do does not exist. He gave you the child. He will provide financially for you to sustain the child, and he can also take away the illness totally. Just have faith. Months passed, and the husband's frustration turned to desperation. He felt himself growing weary, his love for his wife tested by the growing pain of seeing their child suffer and their lives consumed by endless hospital visits. He wished, more than anything, for his wife to see things as he did, to let go, to free their child from a life filled with pain, and to try for another chance at happiness, maybe even another child who could bring them joy without all this heartache. He couldn't bear watching his son suffer, nor could he bear the financial ruin. He tried to reason with his wife, but she held firm in her faith that somehow their son would be healed. Finally, in a moment of deep frustration and hopelessness, he told her she had to make a choice. He asked her to choose, either let their son go or let their marriage go. If she insisted on keeping their child, he could no longer stay. He had fought and prayed for a solution, but he couldn't see his way through the pain and hopelessness any longer. With tears in her eyes, his wife chose to stay with their son. Her love for her son was unshakable, and she believed, more than anything, that she was doing the right thing by holding on to him and hoping for a miracle. For her, the love for their son was more than a choice. It was a commitment, a purpose she couldn't walk away from, even if it meant losing her husband. The man, heartbroken and feeling defeated, chose to leave. He moved out, finalizing a divorce that neither of them had ever imagined. Tears filled her eyes as she faced the man she had once thought she would share her life with forever. 2 years later, the man remarried, and his new wife gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful children. His heart found some healing in this second chance at happiness. He found a kind of peace, watching his children grow strong and happy, grateful for the family he had been given. But he could never completely forget his first son, nor could he shake the guilt he felt for walking away. Sometimes, late at night, he would think of him and wonder if he had made the right choice, if there could have been another way. Meanwhile, his first wife struggled on, taking care of their son alone. Every day was a new challenge, and every month brought more bills, more treatments, and more difficulties. As the years passed and the boy's condition remained unchanged, her support system fell away one by one. Her family and friends who had once cheered her on, encouraging her to keep the faith and believe that one day things would change, are now nowhere to be found. The people who had once promised to help have long drifted out of her life, and she was left alone with the impossible burden of caring for a child who needed round-the-clock attention and expensive medical care. When her son turned 6, the woman found herself without savings, without work, completely alone, and no partner to lean on. She was drained, her body weary, and her hope for a miracle had nearly faded. Every day felt like a battle, and there was no relief in sight. She looked at her son, now in more pain than ever, and felt a deep sadness and desperation that she couldn't escape. She realized she had no way out, no means to give him the life she had once dreamed of. In her broken state, she made a decision that no mother ever wants to make. She decided to end both her and her son's suffering. Convinced that there was no other way, she locked her son in his room, left him with a small amount of water, and quietly left the house, planning to travel far away, hoping that her son's suffering would end swiftly. 2 days later, as her son lay in his room, his weak cries filled the air. A neighbor passing by heard the faint sounds of the boy calling for help. Alarmed, the neighbor alerted others, and they all gathered, listening to the desperate cries of the young boy. Horrified, they quickly called the police, who arrived and broke down the door. They found the boy alone, starving, barely alive. They rushed him to the hospital. Tragically, despite the doctor's best efforts, the boy's frail body could not survive. He passed away soon after arriving at the hospital. When the mother returned, hoping to find relief from her years of suffering, she found herself facing a crowd of neighbors and police officers who had been waiting. She was arrested, charged with abandonment and negligence. Her long years of struggle and sacrifice had led her down a path of despair that ended in tragedy. Her husband, upon hearing the news, felt guilty and sorrow, haunted by the choices they had both made, the love that had once bound them now replaced by regret and sorrow. This is the heartbreaking story of a family torn apart by hope, faith, and love, and by the tragic consequences of choices made in desperation. It's a reminder of the weight that some families carry silently, of the burdens that can push people to the edge, and of the importance of compassion, empathy, and support for those facing unimaginable hardship.